Welcome to the new employee orientation session on equal opportunity and compliance presented by the Human Resources Office of Equal Opportunity and Compliance, or EOC. This presentation will provide an overview of the university's equal employment opportunity or non-discrimination policies. It also addresses affirmative action and the Americans with Disabilities Act. After viewing this presentation, you will know what conduct is prohibited by the university's non-discrimination policy, how to make a discrimination complaint, and how to request an accommodation for religious or disability reasons. Any questions about the content of this presentation should be made to the Office of Equal Opportunity and Compliance. We can be reached by phone at 850-645-6519 or by email at eoc@fsu.edu. The first topic we'll review is equal employment opportunity laws and the university's non-discrimination policy. As an employer and an educational institution, FSU is subject to a number of federal and state equal opportunity and non-discrimination laws, including Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title IX of the Education Amendments Act of 1972, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, the Rehabilitation Act, the Equal Pay Act, and the Florida Civil Rights Act. The university also maintains its own policies prohibiting discrimination. These laws and policies provide overlapping layers of protection against discrimination on the basis of an employee or student's membership in a protected group. This training will provide you with an overview of non-discrimination related policies and procedures at FSU. Internally, the university has several policies that prohibit discrimination, which can be found online at compliance.hr.fsu.edu. FSU's Equal Employment Opportunity Statement outlines the university's commitment to equal opportunity and non-discrimination in employment and education. FSU's non-discrimination policy prohibits discrimination and retaliation in employment and education. This policy identifies the protected groups at FSU and provides procedures for discrimination complaints. FSU's Americans with Disabilities Act policies provides a reasonable accommodation process for individuals with disabilities seeking disability-related accommodations. Information regarding FSU's sexual harassment policy will be covered in a different new employment orientation training. The aim of all of these policies is to create an inclusive work and academic environment in which all individuals are treated with respect and fairness, regardless of individual differences. Non-discrimination means that employment and educational decisions may not be based on your membership in a protected group. This means an employer cannot limit your professional opportunities, take negative employment action against you, or create a hostile environment because of your membership in a protected group. Decisions about your employment should be based on your performance and on legitimate business needs. Equal opportunity and non-discrimination do not mean that you have to agree with every decision made by your supervisor. The key is that employment decisions can't be made on the basis of your membership in a protected group. So what are the protected groups at FSU? FSU's non-discrimination policy prohibits discrimination based on your race, creed, color, sex, religion, national origin, age, disability, veteran status, marital status, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, and other legally recognized protected groups like genetic information. Sex refers to traditional notions of biological sex, male and female. It also prohibits sexual harassment, sexual violence, and pregnancy discrimination. Religion applies to any sincerely held religious belief or to an individual's lack of religious belief. National origin refers to an individual's or their ancestors' place of origin, physical, cultural, or linguistic characteristics. National origin discrimination includes treating people unfavorable because of ethnicity, their accent, what part of the world they came from, because they appear to be of a certain ethnic background, even if they are not, because they are married to or associated with a person of a particular national origin, or because they are connected with an ethnic organization. Age applies to individuals 40 years of age and older. Veteran status refers to an individual's service in any branch of the United States military. Marital status protects both married and unmarried individuals. Sexual orientation, an individual's pattern of romantic or sexual attraction to others. Examples include homosexuality, heterosexuality, bisexuality, and asexuality. Gender identity refers to a person's innate, deeply felt psychological identification as a man, woman, transgender, or some other gender. Gender identity may be different from an individual's biological sex. Gender expression refers to the external manifestation of a person's gender identity, such as dress, grooming, speech patterns, and mannerisms. Gender expression may or may not conform to social stereotypes of masculine and feminine behavior. There are two main types of discrimination prohibited under law and university policy. The first is disparate treatment, which means treating an employee differently because of a protected characteristic. Disparate treatment occurs when an employer intentionally refuses to hire, offers different employment benefits, creates different working conditions, or disciplines someone differently because of that employee's protected group status, such as race, age, sex, religion, gender identity, national origin, or any other group protected under FSU's policy. One form of disparate treatment is taking negative or adverse employment action against someone or denying them benefits offered to other coworkers because of their protected group characteristics. An example of this is refusing to promote someone who deserved it because of their marital status or sexual orientation. Let's try a case study to test our understanding. Samira is considering promoting one of her staff members to a supervisor position. She is choosing between two good employees, Brandon, who is African American, and Anel, who is Latina. She decides to promote Anel because most of the office staff is Latino, and Samira believes they will be more responsive to a Latina supervisor. Did Samira's decision violate the university's non-discrimination policy? The answer is yes. Samira's employment decision was motivated on assumptions regarding Brandon and Anel's race, which is a protected class, rather than their ability to do the job. Even though she may not have intended to treat Brandon disfavorably because of his race, she did. Let's try another case study. Dawn, a supervisor, insists that all employees of Middle Eastern descent sign a loyalty and confidentiality oath to the university every year to prove that they aren't terrorists. No other employees have to sign this oath. Is Dawn violating the university's non-discrimination policy? Yes. Dawn is imposing different employment conditions on Middle Eastern employees by forcing them to sign the oath and not others. This is an example of disparate treatment discrimination. Disparate treatment discrimination also includes creating a hostile work environment for an employee because of their protected group membership. Hostile environment claims usually involve a pattern of harassing conduct, but a single severe incident can create a hostile environment. A hostile environment can be created by different types of behaviors. Examples include, but are not limited to, offensive jokes, slurs, epithets or name-calling, physical assault or threats, intimidation, ridicule or mockery, insults or put-downs, offensive objects or pictures, and interference with work performance. For hostile environment discrimination, the harassing conduct must be based on protected group membership and be either severe or pervasive, widespread, enough that it would cause a reasonable person to find the environment offensive. A hostile environment can be created by anyone in the workplace, not just supervisors. While not all harassing or offensive conduct will rise to the level of discrimination, any disrespectful, belittling, or harassing conduct towards coworkers is always inappropriate and unprofessional in the workplace. Accordingly, such conduct may be addressed by supervisors as workplace misconduct. Let's try another case study. Kiko, a Japanese American, works as a department assistant. Since she began work, a group of coworkers have been making fun of her by slanting their eyes when they see her, calling her ninja, calling her cuckoo, and complaining that she smells like raw fish. They have done this repeatedly during her first 2 months on the job. Kiko has asked them to stop, but they refused. Is Kiko being discriminated against? The answer is yes. Kiko's co-workers' conduct is sufficiently pervasive to create a hostile work environment on the basis of Kiko's race and national origin. What about this situation? Randy and Murat dislike Cindy because she recently got a merit bonus and they didn't. Since then, they have been rude to her. They roll their eyes at her and ignore her work-related emails for as long as possible. Additionally, Randy keeps pointing out minor mistakes in her work to their boss, and one day Murat called her a bitch during lunch. Cindy complains to her supervisor that Randy and Murat are creating a hostile work environment. Is Cindy being discriminated against in violation of the university's non-discrimination policy? In this case, the answer is no. While Randy and Murat's behavior is unprofessional and unacceptable in the workplace, there is no evidence that they are harassing her because of her membership in a protected group. The fact that Murat called Cindy a bitch on one occasion, though offensive, is not severe enough to create a hostile environment based on Cindy's sex. Instead, it appears that Randy and Murat are harassing Cindy because they are angry she got the merit bonus. Keep in mind that even though their conduct does not violate the university's non-discrimination policy, Randy and Murat's supervisor can still discipline them for their unprofessional behavior. The other type of discrimination prohibited under law and university policy is called disparate impact. Disparate impact occurs when an employer has a neutral policy or employment practice that applies consistently to all employees regardless of their protected group status. However, the practice has a disproportionately harsher effect on members of a particular protected group. This type of policy practice is discriminatory unless it is job-related and justified by legitimate business needs. Let's consider another case study. A meatpacking plant requires that everyone applying for a job pass a strength test. The test eliminates over 60% of all female applicants while eliminating less than 5% of male applicants. Is there a potential discrimination problem here? The answer is yes. Even though everyone has to take the same strength test, the test has a disproportionately negative impact on women. Unless the employer can show that the strength test was related to safe and effective job performance, the employer will be found to have committed disparate impact discrimination. Any employment practice or policy can constitute disparate impact discrimination if it has a disproportionately negative impact on a particular protected group and is not justified by business needs. This includes things like dress codes or grooming standards, degree requirements, recruitment practices, and hiring criteria. For the protected groups of religion and disability, the university must go beyond merely not discriminating and must also offer reasonable accommodations. Accommodation requests can be denied if the request would cause an undue hardship on the university. Disability-related accommodations will be discussed later in this presentation, including the process for requesting a disability accommodation. Religious accommodations are adjustments at work that allow an employee to practice his or her religion. If the requested accommodation is costly, compromises workplace safety, decreases workplace efficiency, infringes on the rights of other employees, or requires other employees to do more than their share of potentially hazardous or burdensome work, the university may deny the request. Religious accommodation requests frequently relate to work schedules, dress and grooming, or religious expression or practice while at work. The following are all examples of religious accommodation requests. A Catholic employee requests to use annual leave to attend church services on Good Friday. A Jewish or Sikh employee requests an exception from the normal dress code to allow him to wear a religious head covering at work. An atheist employee asks to be excused from a religious invocation offered at the beginning of a graduation ceremony. An employee who adheres to Native American spiritual beliefs requests leave to attend a ritual ceremony. A Muslim employee requests to schedule and use break time throughout the day for prayer. If you need a religious accommodation, you must make this need known to your supervisors. Supervisors are expected to engage in an interactive process with you and the Office of Equal Opportunity and Compliance to determine if your need can be reasonably accommodated. If you have questions about religious accommodations in your employment, contact the Human Resources Office of Equal Opportunity and Compliance at 850-645-6519. As an employee, if you believe you are being discriminated against because of your membership in a protected group, there are several avenues available to make a complaint. You may report your complaint to your immediate supervisor. If the allegation is against your immediate supervisor, you can contact the next level supervisor or up the chain of command as appropriate. You may contact the EOC directly, or you can file an anonymous complaint via FSU Ethics Point, which is the university's anonymous reporting hotline. You can find FSU's discrimination complaint form on the EOC's website, compliance.hr.fsu.edu. Sometimes employees are afraid to report discriminatory behavior because they are afraid they will be retaliated against. The law and university policy protect your right to make a discrimination complaint or request a reasonable accommodation. It is a violation of university policy to retaliate against a person by taking negative employment action or creating a hostile work environment because they make a discrimination complaint, help someone else report discrimination, participate in a discrimination investigation, otherwise oppose discriminatory conduct in a reasonable manner, or make a reasonable accommodation request for disability or religion. Florida State University's Office of Equal Opportunity and Compliance, or EOC, is responsible for advancing and monitoring the university's Equal Opportunity, Affirmative Action, Family Medical Leave Act, and Americans with Disabilities Act policies, procedures, programs, and initiatives to ensure compliance. The EOC also performs investigations of discrimination complaints made against employees, contractors, and visitors. The EOC serves as a neutral investigator for these complaints. Formal and informal options are available for complaint resolution. Complaints of discriminatory behavior by students are handled by the Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities in the Dean of Students Department. Any employee who experiences or witnesses what they perceive to be discriminatory conduct is encouraged to report the situation to their supervisor or to the EOC so the situation can be addressed. Supervisors who witness or become aware of discrimination affecting someone under their supervision must report the concern or incident to the EOC promptly. Supervisors must also report disability accommodation requests made by individuals under their supervision to EOC. Typically, this report should be made within 2 business days of the occurrence of the incident to be considered prompt. A supervisor's failure to report can result in disciplinary action. It is the EOC's responsibility to handle complaints and to facilitate the interactive disability accommodation process. Be aware that for mandatory reporting purposes, the term supervisor includes resident hall coordinators, graduate assistants, teaching assistants, academic advisors, athletic coaches, deans, faculty advisors, and others. If you are not sure whether you are a supervisor in a given situation, please contact the EOC for a consultation. As a member of the campus community, you must avoid engaging in discriminatory conduct. To avoid offending others, you should work to develop an awareness of behaviors that can be offensive, such as mocking the clothes, food, or physical appearance of people from different cultures, religious beliefs, sexual orientation, or gender expression. Humor based on stereotyping or denigrating members of protected groups, not respecting different beliefs, and making fun of accents or names, including using uninvited nicknames. Engaging in a pattern of this type of conduct could create a hostile environment for your coworkers and violate the university's non-discrimination policy. Now we will turn to the topic of the university's affirmative action practices and legal obligations. Florida State University, or FSU, is committed to the practice of equal opportunity and affirmative action in all aspects of employment. As a federal government contractor, FSU is required to provide equal employment opportunities to qualified minorities, women, individuals with disabilities, and protected veterans. All of the university's job advertisements for faculty, staff, and OPS positions contain the Equal Employment Opportunity EEO tagline. The EEO tagline, which reads, "An equal opportunity, access, affirmative action, pro-disabled, and veteran employer," is mandated by the Department of Labor's Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs, OFCCP. To remain legally compliant, the tagline cannot be shorted or altered. Additional equal employment opportunity affirmative action information is available on the EOC webpage. Now, we will turn to the topic of disability discrimination protections under the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, and FSU's ADA policy. The ADA, as amended by the ADAAA, prohibits discrimination against qualified individuals on the basis of disability in all aspects of employment, such as application for employment, hiring, firing, layoff, and job assignments, promotions, and demotions. Requires reasonable accommodations for applicants and employees with a disability, protects confidentiality of medical information. In addition to disability being covered by the university's non-discrimination policy, FSU has a separate ADA policy. The policy addresses our obligation as an employer to reasonably accommodate a qualified individual with a disability and outlines the request process and determination procedures. The university's ADA coordinator in the Office of Equal Opportunity and Compliance is the official university authority for all non-academic, employment-related ADA compliance matters. All student concerns, requests, and disability accommodation issues such as taking exams, securing assistive equipment for classes, and acquiring an interpreter should be directed to the Student Disability Resource Center, SDRC, for assistance. It is the EOC's or SDRC's responsibility to determine if an employee or student is a qualified individual with a disability and any appropriate reasonable accommodations. The ADA requires an employer to reasonably accommodate qualified individuals with disabilities as long as making such an accommodation does not create an undue hardship or cause a direct threat to the health or safety of the requesting individual or others. Title I of the ADA defines a qualified individual with a disability as a person who, with or without reasonable accommodation, can meet the minimum qualifications and also perform the essential functions of the job. The ADA lists 3 circumstances under which an individual is considered disabled: a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, or the individual has a record of such impairment, or the individual is regarded as having such an impairment. Both physical and mental impairments can constitute disabilities. A few examples of physical or mental impairments are neurological, respiratory, cardiovascular, reproductive, digestive, and skin. Any mental or psychological disorder, intellectual impairment, organic brain syndrome, emotional or mental illness, or learning disabilities. Some disabilities are not obvious, such as epilepsy, bipolar disorder, HIV infection, AIDS, substantial hearing or visual impairment, but they are disabilities nonetheless. Not every physical or mental condition qualifies as a disability. Impairments that are usually excluded from the ADA and not considered a disability are physical characteristics such as hair color, left-handedness, height, weight, or muscle tone, personality characteristics such as temper or poor judgment, temporary non-chronic conditions such as flu or broken limb, gambling or pyromania, sexual conditions such as gender identity or bisexuality, illegal use of drugs, advanced age, obesity, and stress. Special attention is given to the last four italicized topics because the ADA is very complex in its application and meaning regarding these topics. For example, obesity is generally excluded as a disability under the ADA. However, severe or morbid obesity may be included, especially if some related physical impairment occurs. Similarly, stress may be a disability because it may result in depression or other mental disorders, likewise with age. Generally, your age is not considered an impairment. However, the effects of advanced aging may be covered. Although current substance abusers are absolutely not protected under the ADA, the law provides that former addicts undergoing or having completed an alcohol or drug rehabilitation program are protected under the law as long as the employee is no longer a current substance abuser. There is no specific length of time a person must have a condition to qualify as a disability. Long-term and chronic conditions may qualify as a disability. Also, temporary disabilities that occur episodically or impairments that are in remission may be covered by the ADA. Such conditions are considered a disability if they substantially limit a major life activity when active. Examples include epilepsy and cancer. Usually, non-chronic impairments of short duration do not qualify as disabilities. To be considered a disability, the ADA requires that the physical or mental impairment substantially limit one or more major life activities. In general, major life activities are basic activities an average person can perform without difficulty. Examples include, but are not limited to, walking, speaking, hearing, standing, seeing, breathing, performing manual tasks, learning, caring for oneself, sleeping, concentrating, thinking, eating, working, etc. Major life activities also include the ability to perform normal bodily functions. Examples of bodily functions and their associated impairments include immune system, HIV or AIDS, normal cell growth, cancer, respiratory, asthma, digestive or bowel, gastrointestinal disorders like Crohn's disease, endocrine, hormone disorders in the thyroid gland, pituitary gland, sex glands such as ovaries and testes, and etc. Reproductive functions, infertility or treatment, sleeping, narcolepsy, sleep apnea, and hypersomnia, and cardiovascular, heart disease. The second circumstance in which the ADA defines disability is that the individual has a record of an impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. An individual with an impairment that previously limited but no longer substantially limits a major life activity may be entitled to a reasonable accommodation if needed and related to the prior disability. For example, an employee in remission from cancer might need schedule flexibility to attend follow-up doctor appointments to monitor their health. Likewise, individuals who are no longer engaged in the illegal use of drugs or alcohol and have successfully completed a drug and alcohol rehabilitation program would be covered under the second prong of the ADA disability definition. The third circumstance in which the ADA defines disability is when an individual is perceived by others as having a disability even when they do not. For example, a person with a severe disfigurement. Another example would include otherwise non-disabled individuals who are discriminated against because they have a known association or relationship with an individual who is disabled, such as a spouse, a sibling, a parent, or a child. The non-disabled individual is also protected under the ADA because of their affiliation with someone who is disabled. Unless an individual has disclosed a specific condition, they should never be regarded as disabled. If an individual is regarded as, they are not entitled to a reasonable accommodation, but they may file a claim of disability discrimination. Who is not protected under the ADA? Individuals with temporary medical conditions such as colds, the flu, or a sprained ankle, individuals currently engaging in the illegal use of drugs, an alcoholic whose current use of alcohol interferes with job performance, and any employee creating a direct threat to the safety of themselves or others, regardless of whether or not they have a disability. You cannot assume that an individual poses a direct threat based on a stereotype of their disability. There must be an individual assessment of the individual's behavior. For example, any employee who is brandishing a weapon at coworkers poses a direct threat. Once we have determined that an employee is a qualified individual with a disability based on the ADA, FSU has to offer a reasonable accommodation to that employee, as long as making such an accommodation does not create an undue hardship. Whether a requested accommodation causes undue hardship is determined on a case-by-case basis. Reasonable accommodations may include job restructuring, modified work schedule, alteration of the work environment, adjustments or modifications to employment tests and training materials, providing qualified readers or interpreters, making existing facilities accessible to and usable by individuals with disabilities, and transfer of the disabled individual to a vacant position if appropriate. If you are an employee, you are encouraged to contact the Office of Equal Opportunity and Compliance, EOC, directly for assistance. The university's duty to act does not begin until the employee makes a request or self-identifies a need for assistance to a supervisor or to the EOC. The university is required to accommodate a known disability of a qualified applicant or employee. This requirement is generally met and triggered by a request. A supervisor should not independently determine whether an employee's request for an accommodation is reasonable or unreasonable. If you are a supervisor, you are not alone. When an employee asserts their disability and requests an accommodation, you must contact the EOC to initiate the interactive process necessary to satisfy the law. If an employee experiences a temporary medical condition, even if they are not eligible for an accommodation under the ADA, they may be eligible for other assistance offered by the university to aid them during their recovery period. Contact the EOC as a resource to determine what assistance is applicable and available. Keep these etiquette tips in mind when communicating and interacting with individuals with disabilities. Service animals are defined as dogs that are individually trained to do work or perform tasks for people with disabilities. If you have questions regarding a service animal, you are allowed to ask: 1. Is the dog a service animal? And 2. What work or task has the dog been trained to perform? Please do not pet, feed, or distract service animals. They are working animals, not pets. Service animals are allowed in all places open and accessible to the public. Note: these are the same type of questions you would use when dealing with individuals using non-traditional mobility devices such as Segways. If an employee, guest, or student is using an interpreter, please speak directly to the employee, guest, or student and maintain eye contact with them, not the interpreter. If you offer your assistance to an individual with a disability, wait and listen for a response, and then follow any specific directions given. If they do not want assistance, honor that request. Take steps to help make the campus community accessible. Monitor the environment around you. If you can correct an issue, please do. Otherwise, report to the ADA coordinator in the Office of Equal Opportunity and Compliance. Above all, be patient. People with disabilities may sometimes need a bit more time to express themselves or get from place to place. Knowing the correct, polite, and acceptable terminology is important. We've provided you with a quick list of affirmative phrases to use when discussing or commenting about an individual with a disability. Use affirmative phrases when speaking to or about an individual, such as person with a disability, person with cerebral palsy, person who uses a wheelchair, unable to speak or uses synthetic speech, person with psychiatric disability. Time for a case study. Marcia, a receptionist, was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Her physician advised her employer and provided documentation to support the negative impact of heat to her condition. Marcia requested a covered shaded parking space as a reasonable accommodation. Her employer denied her request because the company's policy is that covered parking is reserved for the executive team. Did Marcia's employer violate the ADA? Yes. Marcia filed a discrimination complaint based on her disability in federal court. The case went before a jury trial. The company was ordered to pay a six-figure sum in compensation. In spite of the company asserting that it had a policy to reserve covered parking for executives, when it comes to what is considered a reasonable accommodation, sometimes exceptions to policies or standard practices are necessary. Let's try another case study. Harry is a full-time stenographer for the Jefferson County Clerk of Courts. Last night, while at home, Harry fell and broke his arm. Harry has requested a temporary accommodation from his employer until his arm heals in 6 to 8 weeks. The Clerk of Court denied his request. Did Harry's employer violate the ADA? No. In this case, the Clerk of Courts did not violate the ADA. As we previously discussed, most non-chronic impairments of short duration do not qualify as disabilities. This generally includes simple broken bones absent medical complications in the healing process. In this case, there is no indication that there will be complication in Harry's healing process. Therefore, he is not considered an individual with a disability. Note, this is not a decision supervisors should make alone. They must contact the EOC for guidance. As an employee, it is imperative that you follow the tips in this slide. The laws and university policies are in place for a reason. Please make every effort to follow them to the best of your ability. Monitor and filter your conduct for the workplace. Always treat others with respect and professionalism. Know and comply with all university policies and procedures. Support the university's commitment to foster a diverse and inclusive work environment. Promptly report concerns to appropriate individuals or departments. Get more training. The EOC offers advanced classes in non-discrimination, sexual misconduct, ADA, and diversity through the university's training center. Contact the training center at 850-644-8124 or training@fsu.edu for more details. If you are a supervisor, the university's expectation of your conduct is heightened compared to a non-supervisory employee. Your employment decisions and response to complaints and requests can expose the university to substantial legal liability. Furthermore, as a leader, it is crucial that you model appropriate conduct at all times. Employees look to you to determine what type of behavior is permissible in the work environment. Be consistent and treat employees fairly. Treat all discrimination complaints and accommodation requests seriously and promptly report concerns to the EOC. Do not make snap judgments about a complaint or fail to notify the EOC because of your personal opinions of the people involved. Maintain privacy. Discrimination complaints, related investigations, and requests for accommodation must be kept on a need-to-know basis. Do not repeat or share information with others unless necessary for resolving the concern. Educate yourself by taking supervisory level courses in equal employment opportunity, ADA, sexual misconduct, and diversity through the University Training Center. Also, educate your employees about non-discrimination and related policies. As a supervisor, we encourage you to communicate the policy regularly to your employees. Proactively manage the work environment. Don't wait for an employee to file a discrimination complaint before you take action. Keep your eyes and ears open and respond to inappropriate and unprofessional conduct by your employees before it reaches the level of creating a hostile environment. Document the business reasons for your employment decisions. Do not make decisions on your own. Remember that the EOC is always available for consultations about how to handle difficult situations and to discuss best business practices. As a supervisor, the key to avoiding employment law violations is to be proactive, not reactive. Thank you for your participation. If you have any questions, please call or email the EOC at 850-645-6519 or eoc@fsu.edu.